Thank you very much. I guess the first question did the first slide come up okay on the
Yes, looks great.
platform? Okay, well, technology's working. We're off to a great start. So my name's Robert Solomon. I'm a fire protection engineer with a building code and fire code consulting company based up in Boston, Massachusetts. But today I'm going to be talking about a joint venture company, an effort that we started about 2.5 years ago to integrate or utilize AI around kind of the whole building design plan review process. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I've got the standard slides here on AIA CES criteria. So you probably have seen those a couple of times. I've got the 4 objectives listed here, right? Those are the kind of the official ones. But what I'm really going to kind of look at is kind of this whole plan review process during the ramp up from, kind of concept ideas. And then, right, we go through some schematics and 30 or 35% design kind of all the way through. And then what are the challenges that come along with that in terms of revising design, getting the design through the building department or fire department plan review process, and then how we can actually utilize artificial intelligence to get us there. And along the way, you're going to get a little bit of background on AI, right? I think, since about November of 2022, everybody has kind of maybe fooled around with the open AI platforms or ChatGPT or DALL-E, any of those programs that are out there and readily accessible. But I'm also going to roll in and discuss briefly some of the terminology that's out there. And the terminology is kind of, we have kind of put the brackets on it at our Code Comply AI company here. So you'll learn a little bit about some of that background as well along the way. And then we'll do a brief demonstration of how we apply this on a particular demo project that we're looking at. So Code Comply AI is a joint venture company that was started by SLS Consulting, kind of the building code, fire code consulting company I work for, and Toggle AI. And those of you in Florida might actually be familiar with Toggle AI. That was a company started by Coastal Construction. And Toggle AI is predominantly there to do construction takeoffs using AI. So what the two companies did, we kind of blended the code consulting criteria and ability that we have at SLS with the AI platform that Toggle had. And we kind of developed this concept called Code Comply AI, which is what my focus will be on. So this presentation is done for different groups and entities. Sometimes it's for architects, sometimes it's for engineers, sometimes it's for building departments or fire departments. But we always like to kind of do some level setting in terms of when we're talking about artificial intelligence, what is our definition or how are we describing it? So these are kind of the 4, I guess 4 of the main phrases or terms that you hear thrown around artificial intelligence. And I think one of the first items to look at here, one of the more important items to look at here along the way is the fact that that AI is intended to augment, right? It's going to augment, it's not going to replace us. So just like any other tool we have out there, whether it's the suite of Microsoft Word products, right? Excel spreadsheets, right? They speed our process up, but they don't replace us. We still have to know what numbers to put in the Excel spreadsheet. So AI is going to augment what we do on a daily basis, make us more productive, make us more efficient. And in some ways, when it comes to building, design, and construction, it's going to take out the subjectiveness of how a code provision might get interpreted. Machine learning, right? The use of statistics to find patterns in massive amounts of data. So in this one, maybe the key thing is data. When you think about an architectural drawing, it is loaded with data. I don't know that we often think of it that way, but the data on the plan is, well, what is this room or space being used for? How big is it? What are the dimensions of it? What's the volume? What's the area? When we start looking at building code and fire code requirements, how do I determine that travel distance measurement, right? Those are all data points. The scale in the drawing, that's a data point. So we're going to try to use AI to help us kind of catalog that information and then make some calculations about what it means and how it applies. And we're going to compare that to the prevailing code requirement. And then another concept is image recognition, how the AI software can identify objects. We're not using it to identify people, right? That's facial recognition technology, which is outside of our realm of expertise. But what are the things that it sees? In other words, how has the architect identified something that looks like a door or a toilet or a sink or a piece of furniture, right? And once it can start to kind of collect that in a catalog, and next time it sees it, it says, oh, I believe the AI program will make an educated guess that looks like this must be part of the bathroom configuration or the bedroom configuration, or this looks more like an office layout. And then the fourth one here, OCR, right, which probably everybody has some familiarity with that, optical character recognition, that, right, we know that we can take a raster PDF and we can upload it, and then we can tell the Adobe program to convert that to text, right? So again, it's recognizing the letters in the document, and they can convert that to a Word document for me. So these are the things that we kind of want to make sure that people have some understanding of. And again, these are the sources and terms and definitions that we have utilized for our purposes. So those of you that are members of AIA, and presumably most of you are, you may remember this 2019 white paper from AIA, Disruption, Evolution, and Change. And this basically said, what does the organization want to see in terms of facilitating our work, making our work better? And there's discussion in there about how the code organizations, maybe working with AIA or working on their own, can come up with new ways to help us deliver code complying building construction. And part of that discussion in the white paper talks about using technology, right? Using things like artificial intelligence and using the programs that were really starting to emerge in 2018 and 2019 to help with that. So, right, the organization itself has a vision for automating some of this criteria along the way. And then throughout the course of the past couple of years, we've seen the code organizations take a very active role there. I highlight the NFPA criteria here because I was on the NFPA staff from 1986 until 2020. So it's an organization that's very near and dear to my heart. And now on the consulting side, I use a lot of the NFPA codes along with the codes from ICC and so on. So the code organizations have understood the importance of this. So when we start to look at the whole notion of the plan review process, the ups, downs, the goods, the bads, the frustrations, it generally looks like this, right? This was a very simplified outline that we took from the Indiana Department of Homeland Security, and right, there's some forms to fill out. You get something back saying, you can go ahead and start to proceed, and then at some point you have to upload the drawings that you want the building department or the fire department to review for you. And then, right, there's always some money involved here along the way, right? Somebody's got to pay a fee to get something done. And then the past couple of years, right, there's this other kind of fifth component, patience, right? It isn't that say the architect of record is submitting all this criteria and they submit it on Monday and then they do everything and then they get the comments back from the building department or fire department in 2 or 3 days, right? Sometimes it might be 2 or 3 weeks, or it might be 2 or 3 months, or it might be even longer than that. So part of utilizing technology like AI is how can we accelerate some of that process along the way. So if you look around the country, what we do on the consulting side at SLS, we work on projects globally. But if you look around the country, and you all have this experience, right, in terms of maybe you're even designing a single family home, right? And depending on the jurisdiction, do I get comments back in a week or 10 days or 2 months? This is a snapshot from the City of San Diego Development Services Department. That's the group that oversees the building design, the building permitting and plan review process. And they are a very brave entity because you can go to their website right now and they will tell you the approximate wait time you have to get your plans reviewed. Now, this is from about 18 months ago. And you see that for a basic building review, the first review period was about 3 months. The structural review was about 3 months. What else do we have on here? There was a electrical provision review, again, approaching 3 months, 9 weeks or so, whatever the case might be. So these are numbers that might not look great, but they're actually pretty good compared to some jurisdictions. If you go on this website today, when I just looked at their website about 2 weeks ago, and those numbers are way down, which is great. So does that mean like construction has slowed down? Does it mean that they got more resources to kind of accelerate their own internal review process? But what we're looking at with AI is what can we do to cut into some of those long lead times? A couple reasons to do that. So one is whenever something is wrong in the building department or fire department, they kick the plans back for redesign or you didn't address something, whatever the case might be, we see that there are some real costs associated with this, right? So what Fast Company calls in their article from 2023, they call it rework, but the rework can be anything from I have to do some redesign, I have to do something now because construction is underway, and I have to demolish something and redo it, whatever the case might be. So rework in this article kind of fits into that entire umbrella. And what that does is, right, there are two things here that end up kind of really hurting. And one is time, right? I'm going to lose time if I have to go back and do this. And then once again, somebody's losing money. The developer is losing money because if it's a design error, right, there's going to be a dispute about, well, is that a design error? Was it a contractor error? Who's going to pay for it? So, right, there's some real money associated with that. And then if the building's not delivered on time, then the developer is not recognizing or realizing income from tenants or renters or whoever's going to occupy the building. The jurisdiction is maybe losing out on some tax-based money coming from the completed building and things like that. So time and money kind of come in here, and when according to Fast Company, the contract value there that can associate, 2.5 to 12.5%. You work on an $80 million building, that's probably even real money to a developer who can afford the development of the $80 million building. So what can we do to cut into that or reduce that? And then we also have the issue of worker productivity. We see some information here from about 10 years ago. This is based in some European studies in Germany and the UK, where worker productivity and around construction has kind of been somewhat on the decline for a number of reasons, and we're going to talk briefly about a few of those. About every 6 months or so, NFPA does these kind of surveys about where technology is or what are the things that the skilled workforce could benefit from, and that's predominantly who some of these surveys are targeted at. So, pieces of that are even the skilled workforce wants to see more technology closer to where they're working, and they don't want to be dragging a 500 or 600 page code book with them, right? Or 500-page electrical code book, right? How can they kind of get that information on their smart device or their smartphone or their tablet or whatever the case might be along the way? So what else does that plan review process look like? I've been doing this a long time, and when I started, we used to get the nice big architectural sheets from the design architect. This is when I worked for the military on the design and construction side, and we'd get that and we'd mark it up and we would make notes and we would package everything up, and we'd send a letter back to the architect, and we'd have this back and forth thing, right? So, we have come a long way from that. Now, most jurisdictions in the US and even globally, they want those plans to be uploaded through a portal that the jurisdiction or the government entity controls, and they want a PDF, and then they're going to review the PDF. Now, that process, that trend started probably as early as 2012, 2013, when I was still at an NFPA. We were starting to notice more jurisdictions talking about that. And then that process got accelerated probably about by 8 or 10 years once COVID hit, because you could no longer take your paper drawings, your paper plans into the building department or fire department and drop them off. So that's kind of where we moved that part of the plan review process forward. And now, right, we can get our architectural drawings still done in Revit or in CAD, and they can be exported to PDF, and then they can be uploaded through that portal, that enterprise portal that the jurisdiction prefers you to utilize. At SLS Consulting, we have a number of kind of Excel spreadsheets that have the basic comments that we know we're probably gonna apply on any building project that we're working on once we get the drawings from the architect. So our staff can then simply go in there and they can kind of pick and copy and paste the comments applicable to the project once they see that there might be an issue or something was calculated incorrectly or a piece of information is missing. So even utilizing the Excel spreadsheets for things like that speeds up our own internal review process. And working with a lot of the government jurisdictions that we do, we see that many of them have done something very similar along the way. And so the next part then is when we started to look at the concept of utilizing AI, and one of the founders of this of the Code Comply piece, who's also was the founder of SLS Consulting, Mike would talk to me about this back in 2015 or 2016, saying like, there's got to be a way for computers to like do some of this review stuff when we're trying to compare it to the building code requirements or the life safety code requirements or the requirements for sprinkler systems. And I said, Mike, there probably is, but I have no idea what it would look like. And people having that conversation back in 2015 or 2016 are kind of way ahead of the curve, and we'll see why that was ahead of the curve, and also why we're able to do some of this in 2024. So when we started to look at kind of how this could really happen, we did some internal analysis on what we typically see on a lot of the plan reviews that we were doing on behalf of our architect clients. And we said, boy, a lot of times there is an issue with means of egress, right? Almost half of the comments seem to center on that. And it could have been everything from, boy, they somehow selected the wrong occupancy category, or they used the wrong occupant load factor, or they used, they missed something there. And all of a sudden now we're scrambling to figure out, well, the travel distance is excessive, or we don't have enough exits. We don't have enough exit capacity. So we kind of did our own internal analysis beginning about 3 years ago. And like, what were some of the common themes that emerged for most of these projects? And this is kind of what we saw. Almost half dealt with means of egress, the passive fire protection issues on the building construction types, or when I need a firewall versus a fire barrier wall. Those sorts of things kind of were always floating to the top. And I think to this day, these are still some of the things that we look at. So we said, okay, what if we're going to do something with AI, let's focus on one or two of these to kind of get started. And the one that we're going to look at initially here is really going to center around means of egress provisions. So if you do work in Florida, right, that's a lot of that's going to be Chapter 10 of the Florida Building Code, and then it's going to be compared to requirements in the NFPA Life Safety Code as well. So that's kind of how we selected some of our initial tests here that we came up with. Now, the other thing going on with this are what have the code organizations been doing with respect to technology needs, if you will. I'm going to take these out of order. So the first one, this was a report that the Fire Protection Research Foundation did. That's NFPA's research arm. And this talked about code compliance effectiveness. And that study back in 2008 was looking at, when we look at certain jurisdictions in the US that seem to have a pretty proactive, a proactive public education effort, a proactive, and I don't want to say aggressive, but a very active fire inspection program, right? For not only new construction, but also for existing buildings. What are those jurisdictions doing that are different versus jurisdictions that don't necessarily have advanced programs like that, or not really, they really aren't taking that initiative yet. And those jurisdictions don't have particularly good fire loss histories and records, right? What's different between those jurisdictions? So one of the things that kind of emerged from that was, well, these jurisdictions, and one I remember, was Austin, Texas. They are using technology, right? They're keeping track of things with online portals. They're keeping track of data. They're keeping track of inspections, and they're starting to link the different city agencies, right? So the fire department can see if this restaurant has a liquor license, and the entity in the city that issues liquor licenses, right? Their data is available to the fire inspector, right? So it's all these things kind of starting to work together, right? A little bit clunky maybe, but it's the start of that. And then in 2017, the Research Foundation does this report about technology needs. And in this case, the theme is we need to have tools available that we can, pull up the code requirement in the field on a tablet, right? So things are moving there. Can the code organizations develop apps that I can put on my smartphone? NFPA did a number of apps like that. As I think they were back in 2011, 2012. NFPA experimented with some code apps for smartphones, and that experiment was short-lived. But the idea in 2017 was let's kind of keep let's keep things moving in that direction. So that's another area where we saw, again, predominantly fire departments in the plan review side figured out how to utilize technology for other things. And then the third one is this report that was done. It was published in 2014 by ICC, and we're living in the middle of this, of the results of this report and the survey that's in this report. And you're going to see a separate slide on that. And this really has to do with, when it talks about the future of code officials, it's everything from how will they be doing their jobs in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years? And then the other part of it is, who is going to be doing those jobs in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years? Because a lot of the survey respondents were within probably 10 to 15 years of retirement. And the question is the same number coming in as opposed to the number that are leaving to go into the retirement years? So we'll see a separate slide on that. So what are some other things then that start to kind of come forward here? And again, we're back in 2019 with this report from Deloitte. And this 2019 is kind of one of those watershed years where all of a sudden the term AI is getting thrown around a bit more, if you will. So this 2019 report talks about kind of this triad here, saying like, what types of work in the future can be done by other means or methods. And one of those means and methods is artificial intelligence, right? And then the second one is who is going to be capable and able to do the work, right? So when you look at probably architects, when you look at my profession, engineers, AI kind of becomes a bit more well-suited for that based upon the first item here. And it's important then for the generations kind of going through their educational process now, or even those that have been in practice for a number of years, we have to figure out how this is going to fit into our workflow. And we are going to have to understand what it is, what it isn't, how it works, how it can benefit me. And if it benefits myself and my firm and my company, it should benefit, right. All tides, rise all boats, whatever the expression is. It just slipped my mind, but right, it should make all of us better, more effective, more efficient, and more accurate, probably, when it comes to building code and fire code compliance. And then this one is, where can that work get done, right? I can, you can be on an airplane going from Boston to Los Angeles at 35,000 feet, and you can be refining one of your designs, or I can be doing a plan review, or I can be writing a code narrative, whatever the case is, right? I can do it in my kitchen table. I can do it in my hotel room. So those are the things that are kind of moving us in the direction where we kind of ended up, certainly here, but also back in 2022. What else is different? So MIT says there are a couple of things here, right? So we all have smart devices, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet. I have my watch can tell me certain things now. So we have all those sorts of things. Depending on what document I look at, I think some of the literature now says that as of today, there's about 30 billion smart devices connected worldwide. And the smart technology, right? It's not just, computers, it's the security system in my house, it's the thermostat in the high-rise building I just designed, whatever the case might be. So the next thing in this concept of edge computing, where I don't have to be sitting at a desktop with a huge hard drive in front of me, or with a mainframe computer not more than half a mile from where I'm located. Right, I'm able to do this with a relatively simple laptop now, and I can do that. I can process lots of data from almost anywhere I'm located on the globe, as long as I have internet access, whether it's through a wireless connection, a wired connection, or through a 5G connection, if you will. So again, cloud computing, that's kind of what allows us to get to that point as well. So those two kind of have a close correlation. I don't have to have a wireless network, right? 5G is coming. It's not everywhere, but 5G kind of does allow pretty fast computing speeds out in the middle of nowhere. And then the fifth item here, right? AI tools that mimic human intelligence, not that replace it, but that mimic human intelligence to help us solve problems and kind of move things along and keep us going in the right direction here. So again, this is some of that background. It's kind of important to know why all of a sudden in 2022 was everybody talking about AI. So another thing, again, some of this will get into I'm not going to get into the weeds on it because I don't know it well enough, but it's also important to understand what changed in the past couple of years. So this is a hypothesis from a guy named Gordon Moore. And Gordon Moore was one of the co-founders of Intel. And his hypothesis was about every 2 years, the number of transistors that can go in a microchip for a computer is going to double. It's going to double about, whoops, need to move that out of the way. It's going to double about every 2 years here along the way. So his hypothesis kind of held true. And when we kind of get up here to, again, that, probably that 2017 era, somewhere in here, all of a sudden you see how that value, that number of transistors really kind of got into a big cluster area up there. And that just meant that probably means computing speeds are going to be way faster than they've been in the past. So sure enough, the correlation to that is something called the computing speeds, basically, right? And this correlates to Moore's law, where the computer folks out there, they use the concept called floating operating points, or flops. And these are basically the mathematical calculations that our computers are capable of doing. And just like Moore's law kind of started to see this big cluster in 2017, those computing speeds also started to really ramp up tremendously in 2017. So 2017, 2018, 2019, that's whenever the advent of kind of modern era AI really kind of got to the point where this is going to be readily available and accessible to the entire population, rather than just a bunch of scientists who, kind of sat in the laboratory all day. Now, what's also interesting about this is AI is not an invention in 2022. AI came about in about the late 1950s or so at this conference held up at Dartmouth University. And the purpose of the conference was to figure out how computers could do certain things to augment what people were doing. So, people think AI is this brand new development that all of a sudden appeared in 2022. The reality is it's been on this track since about 1956. And that's kind of where we got there. So when we look at reasons to figure out how to utilize AI for this plan review process, right? We've kind of talked a little bit about San Diego. If I look in San Francisco, they were averaging, wow, that's like 2 years, 627 days for permit approvals. I mean, that kind of seems unacceptable, but if they're resource constrained, that's what everybody's got to figure out how to live with and how to plan for it. Now, I mentioned again, I said we'd have a bit more information on that survey from ICC. And again, remember, this survey is done in 2014, and the survey respondents, a very high percentage were in this category, right? So 10 years later, the 45 to 54-year-olds are now 55 to 64. The 55-year-olds to 64-year-olds are 65 to 74, right? So you kind of see what has been going on here. And the question is, for everybody leaving that profession because probably of retirement, do we have the same number coming in, right? So the question is, what's that difference look like in terms of, do we have enough new people wanting to go into code enforcement, plan review, whether it's for the building departments or fire departments in particular, versus who was going to be retiring out and rotating out of that profession. And we are right smack in the middle of that now in 2024. So that's another reason that we kind of want to look at ways to improve this turnaround time or this turnaround process. We also, you can pick up Wall Street Journal, New York Times, any of the publications, online publications, and you also see the concerns over skilled workforce members that are retiring. In 2023, the National Electrical Contractors Association, NECA, they said they estimated about 10,000 skilled electricians were retiring or leaving the profession every year. And they said about 6,000 were entering the apprenticeship training programs. So now all of a sudden, the numbers of electricians to work on these awesome building projects is starting to go down. And we could probably say the same about the sheet metal workers and the sprinkler pipe fitters and the welders, any of those skilled trades. So now the skilled trades become a premium along with trying to make sure we have enough code officials to kind of keep this process moving in the right direction along the way. So we don't want the permit process to be a bottleneck, right? And the jurisdiction certainly doesn't want it, right? The city of San Francisco doesn't say, come build here. Our plan review turnaround time is only 627 days. They want to facilitate that process, and they don't want to be what precludes it or slows it down by any means. So whenever we look at what AI can do, there's a fair amount of that plan review and the code review process that is pretty manual. It's not difficult, but it takes time. So how can we utilize innovations like AI to speed that process up? So that plan review process then, right, we're going to take the NFPA code or the ICC code. We might have some of our comments pre-populated in a Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. And then we're going to use something like Bluebeam, the Bluebeam measurement tools, to go through and determine areas and linear dimensions and measurements and pathways and things like that. So we kind of have a process that looks like that. And right, NFPA has online code resources, ICC has online code resources. So that part of it is kind of the easy part. And then the difficult part then is, how do I facilitate getting my plan review done and then getting my comments from my database onto the document, the review document I want to return back or send back to the architect of record, so we can get the project moving or keep it moving along and then get construction started. So the electronic plan review tools, there's a bunch out there. At our firm, we tend to favor use of the Bluebeam tool. But what we're doing, just probably like what some architectural firms are doing, we are paying an engineer to sit there and go click, 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 right? They're going to go through and click on all those endpoints, and then they're going to, oh, here's the area. And then we're going to plug the area into our Excel spreadsheet. And once we know the right occupancy type, right, it'll spit out the total number of occupants on the floor. And then we can start doing our checks. Well, how many exits do I need? What's the capacity? What's the travel distance? What's the common path of travel allowed, right? All those things are those data points I talked about at the beginning that AI loves. AI can do all those things because it's looking at the data that's embedded somewhere on the plan along the way. So our concept of co-comply AI that we kind of formalized and started the company about 2.5 years ago is to utilize what AI is really good at to automate most portions of the plan review, right? We'll see some things that it can't do. It may never be able to do them, but that's okay, right? We have to start somewhere, right? It's kind of, we're going to do baby steps first, and we're going to learn to walk and eventually run, and then hopefully we can do marathons, whatever the case might happen to be. So we have a way to look at this. We have ways that it can be shared within the jurisdiction. If one group is doing mechanical review, another group's doing life safety review, and another group's doing accessibility review, those are the things that we want to make sure that it can work across those different departments within the jurisdiction or within the building department or the fire department. So when you think of AI, it's not some like scary science fiction thing, right? It's something like Google Maps, or it's like Waze, right? It's taking data that it's aware of, like it knows the roads, maybe it knows what roads are closed, it knows what the traffic is like, and it will kind of take that data and figure out your optimum way to get from point A to point B. Or it might be like Grammarly, where it's like, okay, you wrote a complete sentence, but you can improve it by doing this, right? So those are maybe some forms of programs that are out there that are versions of artificial intelligence that we don't necessarily think about all the time. And then, right, in December of 2022, all of a sudden this thing called OpenAI and ChatGPT, all of a sudden it's like it's accessible to everybody. And I forget the exact number, but like I think within a day, the number is, it's some crazy number like this, like within 1 day or 2 days of ChatGPT being released, it had like over 1 million users, and they said it took other things like Netflix and some of these other online programs, it took them like 6 months to get 1 million users, right? So people were very, very interested in this in that time frame of November, December of 2022, and then into January and February of 2023. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. So Co-Comply AI, we've developed a series of proprietary programs here along the way. And it's the things that AI likes, right? It likes areas because that uses numbers. It likes object spacing because I'm going to use dimensional lines to figure out how close or how far apart things are. And then it likes things like wayfinding or pathfinding, because once again, it's going to utilize the scale on the drawing to figure out what those routes look like and how far or how close or what the optimum paths might be along the way here. So what it's doing is it likes anything dealing with the number that's going to show up on that architectural drawing or that architectural plan. And then CodeComply AI also has to be compatible with the enterprise permitting systems that jurisdictions use. My guess is that many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with some version of these. These are kind of the online programs that kind of sit on top of a lot of the city software programs. They can manage everything from they can manage the city pensions, the payrolls. They can manage the licenses for, I'm licensed as a healthcare facility or a restaurant, whatever the case might happen to be. So we want to make sure that we integrate with all of those permitting solutions. And then kind of what we have is we have kind of people at CodeComply, like me, that kind of know the code requirements. We have our own software development team. And then we have not seen anything like this anywhere in the world that does what we're doing here. And I think we've got, I think we now have 6 patents issued, and I think we have 2 more in the hopper as of maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we'll see how that goes. So we're going to look at the workflow and a little demo. We're going to look at, we'll touch on most of the 5 things that we have here. And the first question that we usually get is, well, which file format does it work with, right? So when we look at who the potential users are for CodeComply AI, we kind of go down through this list here, and right, there's these kind of five entities. And of the 5 entities, only 2 of them are probably going to be proficient with Revit. Probably only 3 of them are going to be proficient with CAD, but everybody's going to be proficient with PDFs. So the AHJs, where we ultimately want to, excuse me, get some benefit to them, they often now times require the plans to be uploaded in a PDF format. So AHJs are probably not ready to receive Revit drawings or CAD drawings, right? They might in 10 years or 15 years, but right now, that's not where they are. So we said, look, even though the architects want to use Revit, that's great. You can still use Revit. You can export to PDF. CodeComply can mark it up and review it. And then you can go back into your Revit drawing and you can make whatever changes or corrections that are being recommended. So my colleague says it's like, oh, I want to make ice cubes, but before I make ice cubes, I have to have ice cubes and I have to melt them, and then I'm going to put them back to ice cubes. That's kind of our little analogy there. CodeComply works with both vector and raster PDFs. So again, it'll do a little bit better with the vector type PDF. The raster, sometimes it gets confused by a fuzzy line, or it can't make out a dimension or a number or the scale as accurately. And then, the other question was, kind of relating to which one of these. When we started this 2.5 years ago, we thought we were going to develop something that could be used with Revit. And then we found out that not all architects follow the level of development scheme to a T. So they kind of have some variations. Even an architect within the same firm might follow or use different portions of the LED differently on different projects. So we said, we're not going to give up on that, but we're going to kind of park that for right now, and we're going to focus on use of the PDFs along the way here. So we've trained CodeComply on 50,000 plus projects. It still is, each week we get new partners, if you will, or clients we're working with, and we're seeing more and more types of plans with more and more provisions. So let's take a spin through this demo we have. And this is a demo that we've been doing this for a couple of entities since March. So just like any software program, there's going to be some information that the user has to give us input on like project name, address, a couple things like that. There's going to be drop downs for the applicable codes here. So in a Florida project, it would be the Florida Building Code, which currently is based on the 2021 edition of the IBC with the Florida amendments. We also have to compare that against the 2021 edition of the NFPA Life Safety Code. So we have some information like that. We ultimately want to get this to the point where you drop in the zip code where the project's located, and it will automatically populate the codes you need. So that still is a work in progress. We do ask the user to tell us the overall occupancy classification. We know that most buildings are going to be some type of mixed use occupancy. So maybe if I'm dealing with a new high-rise condominium project, right? I'm going to be, I'm going to be a group R1 or R2 if I'm, apartment condominium versus hotel. I know I'm going to probably have some amenity space there, so I might have some assembly use. So we kind of want to, get the user to kind of pick the predominant categories. Depending on how the architect labels the spaces of the rooms, code-compliant AI can figure out if it's assembly or if it's business or what type of residential it might be along the way here. So that's some user input information that we want to get the user to put in. So once I kind of go through that input information, I can go to the next step, and I have, okay, here are the drawings, and which drawings do I want the program to evaluate for me? Do I want it to look at everything or just some of the life safety features? Do I just care about looking at accessibility or plumbing criteria, things like that? Or I can ask it to do everything, right? So the more you ask it to do, right, it'll take a bit longer to process, but that's where we said if the building department's using it, then maybe they've got somebody just looking for accessibility stuff, and they know which architectural drawings or plumbing drawings that they're going to be interested in looking at. So what the program is doing, the program, it vectorizes what it sees in the PDF, meaning nothing more than it's kind of identifying and keeping a list of where all these lines are, right? And one of the first challenges we had was, how does AI know when it's a dimension line versus it's a line associated with a wall or some other kind of architectural feature? So that was kind of one of the first challenges, but we were able to get that figured out. And once it does that, then it can now calculate the area, right? It's going to read the scale on the drawing. Once it knows the scale, it's vectorized all the areas and all the spaces. Now it can calculate the area. If I accurately told it what the occupancy type was, then in the back end, we have the occupant load factor for that. We can start to kind of automatically fill in some of that and, do that math instead of paying our architect or engineer colleague to, click on all the corners and spaces and figure out the area and then plug it into the Excel spreadsheet on their own. So again, it's doing things that aren't necessarily difficult, but it is doing these sorts of things that become a bit time consuming along the way. So we did, it has seen enough drawings. It kind of knows that when it sees a bunch of closely spaced parallel lines, it usually knows that's a stair. In this case, the architect called it a stair. So again, now it can use that OCR, and it read that it's a stair. So once it knows that, it says, oh, that's going to be one of my exit points. And it can start to figure out the width of the stair and the capacity of the stair and any other spaces, the door entering the stair and things like that. Again, items in the code that you have to comply with that aren't difficult, but they just take time to do. So if we can get some of that time back to do actual architectural stuff or engineering stuff, then that's great for everybody along the way. So once it starts to calculate all that, right? It calculates the floor area. It knows when to use gross square footage versus net square footage. Here we are a little 24,500 square feet. I know the occupant load is one person per 200 square feet. So only about 120 some occupants on the floor. And now, since I know I'm dealing with residential, then it's going to be looking and comparing things like the travel distance for an apartment, dead end allowances for an apartment, common path of travel rules, right, which are different between NFPA 101 and the Florida Building Code in terms of how we measure that. But again, it knows it has to check for both of those. So here's a good case showing where AI is dumb. All those green lines you see, all those green lines, those are showing the individual travel distances, right? So the travel distances from the remote point in a room or space to the closest exit. So AI in this case is dumb because if you or I were doing this, we would say, okay, I've got these 3 exit stairs, and I'd say these 2 or 3 rooms look like they're going to be the worst case scenario. So that's a judgment. AI cannot make judgments. So it has to measure every room, every space. And it does that much quicker than you or I could measure one of those rooms or spaces. So again, what it's doing though is it's checking to see if there's, it has to check everything to see what the worst case is. And then if anything is going to fall outside the boundaries of what the code allows or permits. And then if I don't want to see all those green lines, I can kind of expand what it measured, and I can go and I can click on any one of the rooms or spaces, and I can look at each one individually if one of them looks a little bit suspect to me, and I can verify if I've got the right provision going on here along the way. So those are a couple of things that it can do for me. If I want to do some quick checks on the clearance, accessibility clearances for the public bathrooms or restrooms, or if I'm dealing with the FHAG criteria, right, we just kind of drop a circle in there and we look for the overlaps. So again, not a difficult thing to do manually, but time consuming to go check all of the bathroom fixtures and clearances along the way as we go through. So these are a couple of the things that it's able to do for me. It's learned how to calculate and look for things like fire service access elevators, depending on the height of the building. Do I have it? Does it meet the right dimensional criteria? And the other point to point out, this is a good example for Florida, is the FSAE lobby requirements are a little bit different between states and between codes. So, right, they have to be a certain dimensions, certain openings and widths and things like that. So we kind of have taught it to look at those differences depending on the individual state codes along the way. So kind of getting towards the end here and some wrap up. We kind of have a list of about 200 tests. We try to prioritize them along the way. We probably, I think right now as of Friday morning, we have 32 tests running very accurately. We've got another 15 tests running maybe 70% accurate. And then we've got about another 50 tests in the hopper that our developers kind of work on a case-by-case basis, kind of time permitting, as we want to kind of make sure we have things working before we get too far down the road with new tests along the way. So what does AI like, right? These are kind of the things that it really is focused on. It does very well. Things it doesn't like, are judgments. It doesn't like performance criteria, right? Because it's only as good as what it can see on a plan. So it can't make a judgment. Like, for example, one example we talk about is, say an occupancy only allows a 20-foot dead end corridor, and it measures one at 21 feet. Most plan reviewers wouldn't care about that. But AI, again, it's a judgment that a person has to make. Are you okay with 21 feet? So it's things like that I don't see it really ever being able to substitute for that. And then any of you that are kind of what I how do I want to say it? I politely and nicely call them like the code geeks, not the like NFPA code geeks, but like the computer code geeks, right? We use our own software development team, and my colleague Matt Foley and Matt's also a fire protection engineer. We said, like, hey, can you give us a couple of words on this stuff? You're always talking about this at our weekly update meetings, and like, we're not really sure what these things mean. So it says, oh yeah, here, they go, program backend database postgrad. What, we had no idea what that meant. So can you explain that like you're talking to the 10-year-old, right? So they kind of gave us a little bit of a layperson's description for this. So those of you that are interested in the software development and programming piece, we added a little bit in there. We exhibited Co-Comply AI at the AIA conferences, both in 2023 in San Francisco and then this past June in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., I had 5 people ask me about the programming stuff. I'm like, I have no idea. So anyway, this will help me in the future as well as it goes. So what else, whenever we do demonstrations of this, what else do people ask about? Someone said, well, wow, I'd like to know some information about the project. Can it do that? So this is what the LLMs, the large language models, are all about that are out there. There's also a derivative of that called an SLM, which is basically a SLM is a small language model, right? I'm not looking to get every piece of information on this topic that's available globally. I want to know specifically about what I've got here. So we have we've come up with a way to do that. About I can get queries on my specific project, like how many doors or what page is the door schedule on, or is there a door schedule? Where can I find information on the fire dampers, things like that. So it can help help point me to where that information might be somewhere in the plans or on the drawings along the way. So we had some requests for training, and the training was like, we've done a number of 30-second, 60-second, 90-second videos for the onboarding pieces. And then we also figured out that as we were developing this, one of the things that we did on the SLS side is we had to kind of come up with, here's the test we want to do. And right, we would show the software developers, here's the requirement from the code. Right, here are the actual words. Here's what it means. Here are some examples. So all of a sudden we're like doing all these 1-pagers and 2-pagers. And we said, wow, we could maybe turn that into an educational component. So a derivative we have related to Co-Comply AI is Code Academy, where if you have a new staff person starting, maybe it's somebody that's doing the Revit work, or you have an architect who just came out of school with their master's or bachelor's, and they see that Co-Comply AI is doing this test and they don't know what that is, you can just click on the bubble and then it can take you to a 30-second or 60-second overview of the travel path is blah, 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 and defined as, and it will give you that. So we figured out a way to kind of use some of the byproduct of what we had here. And then again, right, here's this, here's this, kind of using the SLM model to find out some specific information, right, to query the plans. And ultimately, I think we'll be able to roll the specifications in here about different things, right? So some questions that people said, well, can it tell me like what codes I have to use or what codes were referenced in the project, right? So instead of thumbing through and finding that, right, it can come back with that in a matter of seconds for the most part. So that's another one of the kind of nice benefits I think that we've had here. So where we are, we have we're in the process of kind of this cross between beta testing and pilot testing. We're pilot testing with a number of colleges and universities. We're doing it with a number of architectural firms throughout the US, a number of jurisdictions, most of which are in the US. So we're kind of doing a lot of close hand holding. And again, like any new software, we launched this thing about 2.5 years ago, and you find that you get so far, and then all of a sudden, like it's seeing something on a plan it hadn't seen before. So again, we're kind of moving slowly towards getting this implemented along the way. Now, final concluding remark then on AI. You heard of this term, maybe AI hallucination, and that's really where you ask ChatGPT or one of the other AI programs a question like I did here, and I get this awesome sounding authoritative answer, but it's wrong. So I'll just exit out. But it sounds really good. If I know nothing about what the common path of travel is, that response sounds really good. And I said, well, I knew that wasn't right. I said, well, is there a limit on that? And it gave me another wrong answer, right? It says that the codes don't specify a limit for a common path of travel. But again, it gives me this authoritative sounding thing. So I have to be careful that I don't put too much reliance on it too early. And that's why this article from earlier this year said with AI, you have to verify, then trust. And those of you old enough to remember some of the SALT talks between the US and Russia, I think Reagan's quote was, trust but verify, right? Trust that our counterparts in Russia are going to adhere to the concepts of the agreement, but then we have to verify that they're doing it. And with AI, it's the absolute reverse of that. You know, let's ask it, let's see what it does, and then we still have to verify it with the person, and then eventually we'll get more comfortable with it. So being an engineer, and we're right at the end here, I'm not very creative, so I asked ChatGPT-4 to write a thank you note to everybody that attended today and the organizers. And I said, oh, and I asked DALL-E to give me a picture of what it looks like when architects are designing a high-rise building using AI. So that is my concluding part here. We've got, it'll be in the slide deck. Be in the slide deck here, our contact information. But thank you very much. I went right up to limit, and I think I am done.
Hey, and Robert, you do have several questions in there. So I don't know if you want to try to take on some of those questions.
Sure. Yeah. If I've got time, sure.
Well, we are on a break, but if you want to answer them, we've got I'd give you could give us like 2 minutes, and then you can actually just go backstage and you can continue to answer those questions, but you'll have to type them in.
Okay, sure. All right. So what, let me do a couple right now then?
You could do a couple.
Okay, yeah. So first one, how does your company or the industry work to prevent corruption of data or unwanted users in the systems and documents so that the work is smooth and accurate flow? So good question. So we've actually are doing a couple of things. We had to go through all of the hoops for the cybersecurity protection stuff, right? That's mandated by the US jurisdictions that are going to allow different software platforms to be utilized. They insist on that. Some of the federal government agencies we've worked with, they have a higher level. I think we just got that license last week or 2 weeks ago. We've talked to folks in Europe. So over there, they have all the GDPR stuff that we have to go through. So that's kind of how that process gets managed, where our platform is hosted on is hosted by AWS. So they have some pretty robust provisions in there along the way. Second one, how does someone override the automated fill-ins in your system or other systems if there are actual variations? So they have experience putting in a zip code, the system auto-populates it, and then there needs to be a correction because the zip code auto-populate does not take into consideration variables, interactions in the zip code database itself. That one I don't know, because our intent is if we get to the point where the user can put in the zip code for the project's located, we have to, I would be shocked if it's going to say a different code would be applicable there. So I think that one would probably be okay along the way there. So.